In this video, I'm showing you exactly how you can scrape leads directly from Google Local Service Area ads completely for free. And so this is going to allow you to start cold calling clients to sell your voice agent offer straight away. I'm going to walk you through exactly how this system works, and I'm going to provide every NA10 template you need so you can copy and paste this straight into your system and start cold calling leads today. Because the reality is, a lot of people spend time learning how to build these AI voice agents, but they never actually make the step to go ahead and try to sell them. And so by the end of this video, you'll have a stack of leads that you can start cold calling to try and sell your offer to. So let's just jump straight into this. So in order to get this set up, you first need to create a Google Sheet. Okay, so you're going to create two tabs. The first one you're going to name markets like this, and you're going to input these columns as I have here. So you're going to put city, state, data underscore CID, last scraped at, and then row ID. So I'll explain what all of this means in just a second. So the first thing you'd need to do after creating this sheet is then get a list of cities. So in this case, these are cities or towns in the US, in Texas, that you're going to be cold calling in. So I've just got this list here, and then I've put the state as Texas. And then we just need a row ID just so we don't get mixed up. So I've just numbered these 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And you can do that by just copying this formula here, and then it's going to fill out the entire spreadsheet. Now, I'll explain what data CID is next. So now that we've decided on the cities we want to call into, we need to actually scrape Google Service ads to get all of the businesses related to your niche within these cities. And in order to do that, we need something called the data CID. And this is basically just an identifier of certain areas that Google uses in Google Maps. And so that's what we're going to use to scrape these leads. So in order to get the CID for all of these areas, what we're going to do is set up an NA10 workflow to get this automatically. So you're going to go ahead in the description and download the first template, which is called Get CID. And you're going to come in here and you're going to import from file, and you're going to upload this workflow. And then this is what you should see. So you can see that we're just manually executing this. And then we have a get rows and sheet. So what we're going to do is set this up, and we're going to make sure that we're selecting the sheet that we just set up. And we're going to select from the markets list, which is the tab that we just set up. That's all you need to do for that node. Then we have a filter here. And so we're basically filtering out for rows that we have a state inputted for, but the data CID is empty. Okay, so you can leave that exactly how it is. You don't need to touch anything. Then we have the simple loop over time node. So this is just going to feed in each city one by one. So we get the CID one by one, basically. And then next, we need to set up an HTTP request to a service called SERP API. So before we set this up, what you're going to do is go to SERP API, and you're going to set up an account. It's completely free. You don't need to pay for anything. You get 250 API calls a month, and that's more than enough to scrape lots of leads. So as soon as you've set up your account, you're going to go to API key, and then you're going to have the API key here. You're going to copy this. You're going to go back to your workflow, and now we're going to set up the HTTP request. So we're going to make sure that this is a GET. Okay, the URL should already be in the imported workflow. And then we're going to send query parameters. Okay, so again, you don't really need to touch much here. Engine is Google Maps. This is basically just the parameters we need to send to SERP API in order to scrape what we need to get. And so for this section here, these are variables which we're pulling directly from Google Sheets. So you don't need to touch anything here. And then the only thing you need to change is you need to put your API key in this section here. So you're going to copy and paste your API key here. And then that's all set up. So now we're going to then update this row in sheet and just make sure that it's set up to the sheet and the tab that we just created together. We're going to match by row ID. And again, you don't need to touch anything here, and you don't need to touch this either because it's a variable and this should work straight out of the box. But basically what we're doing here is we're using SERP API to find out the CID for each area, and then we're going to plug it back into our Google Sheets. So I'm going to run this execution, and you'll see that these columns here get filled out, basically. Okay, so we're executing the workflow here. And what you're going to see is that one by one, all of these rows are going to be filled out with the CID, which is crucial for the next step. And you'll notice that last scraped at is empty, and that's perfectly fine. That's something that we're going to do when we actually scrape the leads using the data CID. Okay, perfect. So all of the data CID rows are now filled out for each area. Now, for the next step, before we move on to the NA10 workflow, we're going to set up a second tab called Dial Today. So this is where all of our leads are going to get inputted into, and this is where we can cold call directly from. So you're going to set up a sheet with these exact titles. So date, title, phone, rating, reviews, years in business, service area, market state, and notes. So we're going to leave the notes part empty because this is what we're going to use for when we start cold calling to keep notes about who's answered, who was not interested, and so on. So once you've set that up, you're going to name it Dial Today, exactly like this. And then you're going to go ahead and import the second NA10 workflow template. So again, you're going to download it in the description. You're going to import from file, and this is what you should see. Now, again, you can see this is a manually executed workflow. And then we've got a get rows sheet here. So we're going to open this up to get this set up. You're going to make sure you've selected the correct Google Sheet. And this time we're going to get from markets. Okay, so that's that node set up. The if node, we don't need to change. And then we have update row in sheet. Okay, so we're going to update the markets row. So making sure we're selecting the correct Google Sheet. And we're matching by row ID. So this is where we're inputting the last scraped at column, just so that in the future, when we're scraping leads, it's going to look at that and say, we've already scraped this lead, so we don't need to redo it. I hope that makes sense. So now we have another HTTP request to SERP API. So you're going to set this up. Again, same method as get, and you don't need to touch anything here except for this value here. So in my case, I'm scraping leads for roofing companies, but if you were scraping leads for plumbing companies, then you can come in here and just change it to the keyword that you want. So make sure that this is specific to the niche that you're targeting. And then again, you just need to input your API key, the same one as before, and then that's all set up. So next we have a code node. So we're basically just extracting the leads from the last API call. So you don't need to touch anything here. So the next node you'll notice is called score lead. So what this is basically doing is it's taking all of the data from the API call we just did to scrape all of those leads, and it's filtering them, and we have a custom system set up to be able to score them on a point system of 0 to 15. So for example, for voice agents, if a company has over, let's say, 800 reviews, that means they're probably a massive business and they already have systems set up to take calls. They probably have a call center or a team of receptionists. And so we don't really want to be targeting those companies. Now, you can adjust this to your specific niche. So what I would recommend doing is copy and pasting this code and chucking it into ChatGPT and just explain that you want to change the scoring system to specific to your niche. So this is specific for roofing. So let's say you are targeting plumbing niches. You would want to basically just explain, look, this is for roofing. I want you to adjust the code to make it specific for plumbing with the same scoring system. So you need to adjust this specific to your niche. Otherwise, this is not going to work for you. Then we have an if node. So after it's been given a score 0 to 15, I've just set it to if the score is greater than 8, then we're going to keep it. If it's less than 8, then they're probably not quality leads and we're going to chuck them out. And then finally, we're just inputting all of the data we've taken into our Dial Today Google Sheets so that we can start cold calling. So again, you're going to make sure this is connected to the correct Google Sheet. And this time, instead of markets, we're taking from the Dial Today tab. So you'll see that we're matching by phone here. And so this means that if the same number is being used, we're not going to have duplicate leads. So this solves the problem of having duplicate leads into our system. Once that's set up, we're pretty much good to go. So what I'm going to do is execute this workflow and we'll see that our Dial Today tab gets filled up with leads. So let's see how this goes. Okay, now let's see. Bam, look at this. So these are all leads that I could cold call today. We have the date that we scraped the lead. We have the name of the business. We have their phone number. We have the rating on Google. We have the number of reviews, how many years they've been in business, and then their service area. Now, market state, I already know this is in Texas, so I could just fill this out manually if I wanted to. And then notice what I'm going to use to actually go through and cold call them and take notes as I go. But you can see, just from that simple scraping exercise, I've got 162 different leads that you could cold call today. And that is pretty much the entire system. And so what you would do is go through this lead list and call them one by one and try and book them into appointments. And then once you've run out of leads, then you'd come over to markets and you would just plug in a bunch of new areas or cities that you want to target and then repeat the process. So that was quite a quick video, but I hope that was super useful. You can see that with this system, we're able to get a bunch of different leads within 10 minutes that you can actually start cold calling today. And this way you can actually start selling your AI voice agent offer instead of just focusing on building and learning and not actually selling anything. So I hope this motivates you to actually take the next step into selling these services. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.